He always smelled of sawdust and fresh paint. It wasn't a cologne or an affectation. It was the scent of his promises. Each promise was a plank of wood or a fresh coat of primer on a wall that wasn't ours yet. He was a builder. You see, not just of houses but of futures. My future, or so I believed. His name is Liam, and for 5 years, his hands calloused and sure were the architects of my world. A world he promised me, but one I would never get to live in. It started, as these things often do, with a dream sketched on a napkin in a late-night diner. We were 24, filled with that reckless brand of optimism that only youth can afford. I was a graphic designer, making logos for companies that would likely fail in a year. He was a carpenter, working for a contractor who clipped his wings and stole his credit. We were nobodies, but we had a blueprint. Look, he'd said, his eyes gleaming under the fluorescent hum of the diner lights. He slid the flimsy napkin across the sticky table. It was a sketch of a house, not just any house. It had a wide porch that wrapped around it like a hug, big windows to let in the morning light, and a small, crooked chimney that looked like it was smiling. "This is it, Lara," he whispered, his voice thick with a certainty that pulled me in like a tide. "This is our start. I'll build it from the ground up. For us, for us." That phrase became the foundation of everything. It was the bedrock on which every decision, every sacrifice was built. I took on extra freelance work, my nights bleeding into mornings fueled by coffee and the image of that wraparound porch. I designed websites, brochures, wedding invitations for strangers, each pixel a tiny contribution to our shared dream. The money I made wasn't for new shoes or vacations. It was for lumber, for concrete, for the copper piping he said would last a lifetime. Our lifetime. Liam, in turn, worked tirelessly. He quit his dead-end job and started his own small company, Heartstone Homes, a name I came up with, by the way. I even designed the logo, a simple, elegant hearth with a warm, glowing fire inside. It was meant to symbolize everything we were building toward: warmth, security, a home. He started with small jobs decks, kitchen remodels, bathroom renovations. He was brilliant, truly. His clients adored him, not just for his skill, but for his passion. He didn't just renovate a kitchen. He imagined the family that would gather there for breakfast. He didn't just build a deck. He pictured the summer barbecues and the quiet nights spent staring at the stars. And I was always there, right beside him, the silent partner. In every imagined future, "We need a better truck, he'd say, and I'd agree, transferring $1,000 from my savings. "This land just came up for sale. It's a bit more than we budgeted, but it's perfect." And I'd look at the pictures of the overgrown field with its single, majestic oak tree, and I'd say, "Let's do it, my inheritance." From my grandmother, it became the down payment on that perfect piece of land. I never hesitated, not once. How can you hesitate when someone is promising you the world? You just hold on tight and pray they don't let go. The first 2 years were a blur of hard work and giddy exhaustion. We were a team. He was the builder, and I was the support beam. I managed the books, answered the client calls when he was on a roof, designed the marketing materials, and made sure he ate something other than gas station sandwiches. I was the unpaid business manager, the CFO, the marketing director, and the head of morale. And I did it all gladly, because every invoice I sent, every happy client review I read, was another step closer to our house under the oak tree, to our world. The change was subtle at first. So subtle, I told myself I was imagining it. It started with the phone calls. Liam had always been terrible with his phone, but this was different. He started taking calls outside, his voice dropping to a low murmur. When I'd ask who it was, he'd wave a dismissive hand. "Just a client. She's a bit demanding." Or a supplier issue. "Don't worry about it." The name that kept cropping up was Valerie. She was a new client, apparently, a wealthy one. "She wants a complete gut job on a lakeside property," Liam told me, his eyes shining with the prospect of such a big contract. "This is it, This is the job that will finally let us break ground on our place. After this, it's all about us. After this." Another promise, Another delay I willingly accepted. But Valerie, she wasn't just a client. The calls became more frequent, the texts more secretive. He started having late-night site meetings. He'd come home smelling, not of sawdust and paint, but of expensive perfume and wine, a floral scent that clung to his clothes and made my stomach twist. "You're working too hard," I'd say, trying to keep the suspicion out of my voice. "You seem exhausted. Big project," he'd reply, avoiding my eyes. "Valerie is particular. She wants everything to be perfect." He used that word a lot when talking about her. Perfect. It was the same word he used to describe the land we bought together. It felt like a betrayal, like he was giving away our special words to someone else. One night, he came home well after midnight. I'd been waiting up, a cold knot of dread tightening in my chest. He stumbled in, looking flushed and happy. "We finalized the designs," he announced, a little too loudly. "At midnight?" I asked, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. "She wanted to celebrate," he said, shrugging off his jacket. And that's when I saw it. On the collar of his work shirt, a smudge of deep red lipstick. The color of betrayal. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an accident. It was a statement. My world, the one so carefully designed and built on promises, suddenly had a crack right down the middle. And I had a horrible, sinking feeling that it was about to shatter completely. The air in our small apartment was suddenly thin, sharp. I stood there, frozen, my gaze locked on the crimson smear on his collar. It wasn't just lipstick. It was evidence. A piece of a puzzle I never wanted to solve. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of denial and dread. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw his jacket in his face and demand answers. But I also saw the look in his eyes, a flicker of panic, quickly masked by a weary smile. If I screamed, he would build a wall of lies so high I'd never be able to scale it. No, if I was going to find the truth, I had to be smarter than that. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to be steady, almost casual. "Wow, a celebration, huh? Must have been some meeting." I walked over, took the jacket from his hand, my fingers brushing against the rough denim. I didn't look at the collar again. I didn't have to. The image was burned into my mind. "Yeah," he said, running a hand through his hair. "Valerie, she's ecstatic, thinks I'm some kind of miracle worker." He flopped onto the sofa, exhausted, or pretending to be. I could no longer tell the difference. I hung the jacket in the closet, making a mental note of its exact position. Evidence had to be preserved. "Well," I said, my back to him, "I'm glad it went well. This contract is important for us." Us. The word felt like ash in my mouth. That night, sleep was a distant country I couldn't visit. I lay beside him, motionless, listening to the rhythm of his breathing. Was it the steady breath of an innocent, sleeping man, or the contented breath of a liar who had gotten away with it? The man next to me, the man whose scent of sawdust I used to find so comforting, now felt like a stranger, a dangerous one. The world he had promised me felt like it was shrinking, its beautiful vistas being replaced by claustrophobic walls. The investigation began the next morning. It felt shameful, digging into the life of the man I loved, but the alternative, living a lie, was unthinkable. My sanity depended on the truth. He left early, mumbling something about needing to check on a shipment of custom windows for Valerie's project. The moment the door clicked shut, I was in motion. I started with his work truck. A few years ago, after a trailer full of expensive lumber was stolen from a job site, I had convinced him to install a GPS tracker in the truck. For insurance purposes, I'd argued. To protect our assets, he'd agreed, without a second thought. Now, that tool of protection was about to become my tool of discovery. I logged into the tracking app on my laptop, my hands trembling so hard I could barely type the password. A map bloomed on the screen, a small dot showing his truck currently parked at a lumber yard across town. That checked out. But the app had a history feature. I clicked on it, my breath held tight in my chest. I navigated to the previous night. I expected to see the route to the fancy restaurant he'd mentioned, the one where he and Valerie had celebrated, and it was there. The truck had been parked there for 3 hours. But after that, it didn't come home. Not right away. The little digital line snaked away from the restaurant district and headed toward the affluent, secluded neighborhood of Cypress Heights. It stopped on a quiet, tree-lined street and stayed there for 2 hours. From 10:30 p.m. to 12:30 a.m., it was a residential address. Not a bar, not a supplier, not a late-night lumber yard. A home. Her home. It had to be. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a site meeting. This was something else. Something intimate. I printed the map, the route, the times, the first piece of hard evidence. Next, the finances. I had managed our joint account and the business account from day one. I knew his spending habits better than he did. I logged into the credit card portal, my eyes scanning the recent transactions. Fuel, lumber, tools, and then things that made no sense. A charge from 2 weeks ago at a place called Fleur Amour, a high-end florist. $150. He hadn't bought me flowers in over a year. Another charge at a ridiculously expensive jewelry store downtown, the Gilded Box. The charge was for $800. It was dated last month, right around my birthday. He had given me a new power drill. Practical, he'd said, for when we started on the house. The drill had felt thoughtful at the time. Now, it felt like an insult, a distraction. Who was the jewelry for? Who got the roses? The answer was a bitter pill I was already beginning to swallow. It was for Valerie, the client, the woman with the perfect project and the expensive perfume. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, going through the motions of my own work, but my mind was elsewhere. It was in his truck, on that quiet street inside that jewelry box. When he came home that evening, he was back to smelling of sawdust and sweat. He kissed my cheek, and I had to physically stop myself from recoiling. Tough day, he sighed, dropping his tool belt by the door. Those custom windows are a nightmare. Wrong measurements. Oh no, I said, my voice a perfect imitation of sympathy. That's terrible. Will it set you back? A few days. Valerie's not happy. I'll have to go smooth things over with her tomorrow. He was looking right at me. His blue eyes, the ones I had always thought were so honest, now seemed like expertly crafted fakes. Every word was a lie. The GPS history from that day showed his truck had been nowhere near the window supplier. It had been at a golf course all afternoon. The proof was piling up. It was a toxic, suffocating mound of deceit. Each receipt, each GPS log, was another nail in the coffin of the life I thought we were building. He wasn't just cheating on me. That would have been simple, in a brutal sort of way. No, this was far more complex. He was using the resources of our dream, the business I had helped build, the money I had contributed to construct a secret life with someone else. The final piece I found that week was the one that broke me. I was doing laundry, a mundane chore that suddenly felt like a forensic investigation. As I emptied the pockets of his work jeans, my fingers closed around a small, hard object. I pulled it out. It was an earring, a small, elegant pearl stud, nestled in a tiny, velvet-covered clasp. It wasn't mine. I was allergic to cheap metals. I only ever wore gold. I stood there in the laundry room, the hum of the washing machine filling the silence as I stared at the pearl. It was so small, so innocuous. But it was louder than a confession. It was the earring of a woman who could afford $800 gifts from the Gilded Box. The earring of a woman who lived on a quiet, tree-lined street in Cypress Heights. The earring of a woman who was living the life he had promised me. He had promised me a world built of solid oak and warm hearths. But the proof was in my hand. He was building that world all right. He was just building it for another woman. The pearl earring lay in my palm, its iridescent surface seeming to mock me with its quiet purity. It felt heavy, like the full weight of Liam's deceit condensed into a single, tiny object. For days, I had been a ghost in my own home, collecting secrets and swallowing my rage. But this pearl, this was a physical object, a piece of her in our space. I couldn't ignore it. The time for quiet investigation was over. It was time for the storm. I didn't place it on the kitchen counter for him to find. That would have been too subtle. I waited. I waited until he came home, until he'd showered away the day's grime, until we were sitting down for dinner, a dinner I had cooked in a kitchen I had paid for. He was talking about the project, as he always did now, about Valerie's impeccable taste, about the imported Italian marble she'd insisted on for the master bathroom. Every word was a tiny cut. He was mid-sentence when I opened my hand and placed the earring on the table between us. It sat on the dark wood, stark and white and undeniable. Liam stopped talking. His eyes flickered from my face to the earring, and for a fraction of a second, I saw it again, pure, undiluted panic. But just as quickly, the mask slammed back into place. He frowned, a perfect picture of confusion. "What's this?" he asked, his voice calm. "Too calm. You tell me," I whispered, my own voice tight. "I found it in your jeans pocket." He looked at it again, then chuckled. It was a hollow, ugly sound. "Oh, that. It must be Valerie's. It probably fell off while we were looking at tile samples. You know how she is, always rushing around." He picked it up, casual, as if it were nothing more than a stray button. "I'll give it back to her tomorrow. Thanks for finding it." He was so smooth, so practiced. For a terrifying moment, I almost believed him. I almost let the wave of his confidence wash over my mountain of evidence and reduce it to sand. But then I remembered the GPS logs, the jewelry store receipt, the smell of her perfume. "Really?" I said, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "She just lost an earring while you were alone with her at her house past midnight." His face hardened. The fake warmth vanished. "What are you talking about, Lara?" "I know where you were, Liam," I said, my voice gaining strength. "I know you weren't at a restaurant celebrating. I know you were at her house in Cypress Heights for 2 hours." The color drained from his face. He stared at me, his mouth slightly agape. I had finally said something he wasn't prepared for. "How? How would you know that?" "The GPS tracker in the truck," I said flatly. "The one I convinced you to get to protect our assets." He stood up so fast his chair scraped violently against the floor. His fists were clenched. "You've been spying on me?" he yelled, his voice booming in our small apartment. "You've been tracking me? What is wrong with you? Are you crazy?" There it was. The word I knew was coming. "Crazy." "I'm not crazy, Liam," I shouted back, standing to face him. "I'm not the one lying. I'm not the one buying $800 pieces of jewelry while telling my girlfriend a power drill is a thoughtful birthday present. I'm not the one coming home with lipstick on my collar." Every word was a bullet, and I could see them hitting him. He flinched. He took a step back. He was cornered, and a cornered animal is the most dangerous. He switched tactics from denial to offense, from liar to accuser. "This is unbelievable," he sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. "I am working myself to the bone to get us on track for our future, to build our house, and you're here, acting like a paranoid, jealous child. You're so wrapped up in your own insecurities you're inventing things. Valerie is a client, a very important, very wealthy client. Yes, I have to manage her expectations. Yes, that means sometimes I have to meet with her at odd hours. It's called building a business, Lara. Something you used to understand." He was twisting everything, painting me as the villain, the unsupportive partner, the hysterical woman. He was trying to make me doubt my own mind. So the florist, the gilded box, all just part of managing her expectations. I shot back, my voice shaking with rage. "Yes," he insisted. "Client gifts. It's standard practice when you're dealing with people at this level. It's to ensure she keeps recommending us, so we can finally build our own damn house. Everything I do is for that. For us. Why can't you see that?" He was so convincing, so passionate in his defense. But it was all a performance. I knew it was. The proof was locked away in a folder on my laptop. The problem was, my proof was also proof of my snooping. In his narrative, he was the hard-working victim, and I was the unhinged spy. "I'm going out," he spat, grabbing his keys from the hook by the door. I can't even look at you right now. You've created this ugly story in your head, and you're punishing me for it. When you decide to stop being crazy and come back to reality, let me know." And with that, he was gone. The door slammed shut, leaving me alone in the wreckage of our dinner, the silence of the apartment ringing in my ears. The pearl earring was still clutched in his hand. He was going to return it to her. I sank into my chair, the fight draining out of me, replaced by a chilling clarity. He would never admit it. He would twist and lie and gaslight me until I believed I was the one who was broken. He said I was crazy. He said I was imagining it. But the proof wasn't just in my head. It was on maps, and on bank statements, and in the empty space in a jewelry box that wasn't mine. He hadn't just lied to me. He had declared war on my sanity. And I knew, in that cold, quiet moment, that I had to find a way to win. He called me crazy. That word echoed in the oppressive silence of our apartment long after the door slammed. Crazy. It was the coward's last line of defense. The ultimate tool to dismiss a truth you don't want to face. He hadn't just lied. He had tried to rewrite my reality, to make me the author of my own pain. For a few hours after he left, I let the doubt seep in. Was I paranoid? Was I reading malice into simple business dealings? But then my eyes landed on my laptop. Inside that sleek metal shell was the truth. It wasn't a story I had created. It was a trail of data he had left behind. The argument hadn't broken me. It had forged me into something harder. Grief was a luxury I could no longer afford. Revenge was too simple a word for what I wanted. What I wanted was restitution. I wanted to reclaim the world he had stolen from me. And to do that, I needed more than just a handful of suspicious receipts and a single pearl earring. I needed an ironclad case. My deep dive began that night. I transformed our dining table, the scene of our last battle, into a war room. I wasn't just a Lara, the heartbroken girlfriend, anymore. I was a forensic accountant, a private investigator, and a plaintiff building her case. My first step was to create a new, secure email address and a cloud drive, completely separate from anything he could possibly access. Methodically, I began to download everything. Years of bank statements from our joint accounts, credit card bills, business invoices, client communications. I saved every digital breadcrumb that proved my existence and my contribution. I found the original wire transfer confirmation for my grandmother's inheritance. $50,000. The note on the transfer simply said, "For Hearthstone." I found the early emails where I had designed the company logo, with Liam's enthusiastic replies. "It's perfect, EL. You're a genius." I compiled a portfolio of the marketing materials I'd created: brochures, local newspaper ads, the company website I had built from scratch. I was the invisible force behind his professional image. As I dug deeper into the business finances, a darker picture emerged. For the first 3 years, my freelance income, often thousands of dollars a month, was deposited directly into our joint account, propping up the business during lean times. I cross-referenced these deposits with business expenses, paid on the same days. My money for a logo design had paid for his table saw. My earnings from a wedding invitation suite had paid for his liability insurance. I wasn't just a supportive girlfriend. I was the primary early-stage investor, an angel investor who was being treated like a fool. The most damning discovery came from the credit card statements. I started categorizing the expenses. There were the legitimate business costs. There were our shared living expenses. And then there was a third category, a secret ledger. Hundreds of dollars spent at restaurants I'd never been to. Charges for upscale bars. A recurring monthly payment for a high-end gym membership near Cypress Heights. And then I saw it. A charge from a company called Blue Wave Linens. I Googled the name. They sold luxury bedding, Egyptian cotton, 1,000-thread count sheets. The charge was for over $600. I felt a wave of nausea. We were still sleeping on the same cheap microfiber sheets we'd bought 5 years ago at a discount store. He was literally building a softer, more comfortable life for someone else while I slept on scratchy polyester, dreaming of our future. The digital evidence was overwhelming. It painted a picture of calculated, long-term deception. But it was all just numbers on a screen. Data points. I needed something visceral. Something real. I needed to see it with my own eyes. I looked again at the printed map from the GPS history. The route to the quiet, tree-lined street in Cypress Heights. I had the address. The thought of going there terrified me. What would I see? Would he be there? Would she? Part of me wanted to stay here, safe with my digital proof. But I knew it wasn't enough. To truly reclaim my sanity, I had to confront the reality he had so carefully hidden. I had to see the world he had built without me. I had to see the house. The next afternoon, I got in my car. My hands were slick with sweat on the steering wheel. With every mile I drove towards the wealthier side of town. My heart beat faster. I wasn't Ilara anymore. I was a pilgrim, on a painful journey to a shrine built on my own broken promises. I didn't know what I would find, but I knew that whatever it was, it would be the end of one life. And the beginning of another. Cypress Heights wasn't just a neighborhood. It was a statement. The streets were wider, the trees were older, and the houses sat far back from the road, shielded by manicured lawns and iron gates. There was a quiet, intimidating elegance to it all, a world away from our cramped apartment and the noisy city streets I knew. This was Valerie's world. This was the world Liam had been aspiring to, not with me, but for her. I drove slowly, my cheap compact car feeling brazenly out of place among the Teslas and luxury SUVs parked in the driveways. I checked the address on my phone one last time. 14 Willow Creek Lane. I turned onto the street, my breath catching in my throat. It was even more beautiful and secluded than I had imagined. A canopy of ancient oak trees formed. A tunnel of green overhead. And then I saw it. At the end of the lane, nestled in a gentle curve of the road, was the house. Liam's truck was parked in the driveway. My heart stopped. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I pulled my car over to the curb, 100 yards away, partially hidden by the low-hanging branches of a willow tree, and I just stared. It was the house from the napkin. It wasn't just similar. It wasn't an inspiration. It was it. The wide, welcoming porch that wrapped around the front. The large, floor-to-ceiling windows designed to catch the morning light. The roof with its distinctively steep pitch. And there, on the right side of the roof, was the chimney. A small brick chimney, built with a slight, almost imperceptible tilt. The smiling chimney. Our chimney. A sound escaped my throat, a choked, wounded gasp. This wasn't a client's project. This wasn't a job he was doing to save up money for our dream. This was our dream. He had taken the most sacred, intimate blueprint of our shared future and had built it for another woman. He hadn't just stolen my money or my time. He had stolen the very architecture of my soul. I sat there paralyzed, the engine off, the silence in my car screaming. The memories flooded in, so vivid they were like ghosts sitting in the car with me. Liam, sketching excitedly on that napkin. Me, poring over paint swatches and flooring samples. Us, walking through that empty field with our single oak tree, pointing to where each room would be. The kitchen goes here, yell, so you can see the sunrise while you have your coffee. The studio for your design work will have the best light, I promise. All of it. Every promise, every shared whisper in the dark, was a brick in this house. A house I would never enter. As I watched, the front door opened. Liam stepped out onto the porch. He wasn't wearing his dusty work clothes. He was wearing a soft, casual shirt and jeans. He looked relaxed. He looked at home. He turned and said something back into the house, and a moment later, a woman appeared. She was tall and slender, with sleek, dark hair. Even from a distance, I could see she was beautiful in that effortless, expensive way. She was wearing an elegant sundress. She walked over to him, slid her arm around his waist, and leaned her head on his shoulder. He kissed the top of her head, a gesture of casual intimacy that felt like a physical blow. This was Valerie. She wasn't a demanding client. She was the lady of the house. Our house. They stood there together on our porch, looking out at their perfect lawn. They looked like the perfect couple, in their perfect house, living a perfect life. The life that was supposed to be mine. The life I had funded with my inheritance, with my late nights, with every ounce of my faith in him. That was the moment the heartbreak finally shattered and fell away, leaving behind something cold and diamond-hard in its place. The tears I thought would come never did. My sorrow curdled into a pure, clarifying rage. He hadn't just promised me the world and given it to someone else. He had made me pay for its construction. I put the car in drive. I didn't speed away. I drove past the house slowly, my eyes fixed on the smiling chimney. It wasn't smiling anymore. It was mocking me. Let them have their moment, I thought. Let them stand on that porch and feel secure. They had built their world on my back, on my trust, on my love, and I was about to show them just how unstable a foundation that really is. The drive back from Cypress Heights was a blur. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I was encased in a layer of ice, my thoughts moving with a chilling, crystalline precision. Seeing that house, my house with her in it, had cauterized the wound. There was no more pain. There was only purpose. I walked into the apartment, and it was like seeing it for the first time. It was small. It was temporary. It was a place I had been living while my real home was being built for another. Liam came home an hour later, carrying a bag of takeout, feigning normalcy. He was testing me, seeing if I had come back to reality as he'd so arrogantly demanded. I played my part. "Hey," I said, my voice even. I'd spent the last hour practicing it in the mirror, stripping it of all emotion. He looked at me, surprised by my calm demeanor. "Hey, you okay?" "I'm sorry," I said, the words tasting like poison. "You were right. I've been under a lot of stress. I overreacted." It was the most difficult, most strategic lie I had ever told. I needed him compliant. I needed him to believe he had won, that he had successfully crushed my spirit and bent me back to his reality. A comfortable liar is a careless liar. Relief washed over his face, so palpable it was disgusting. "Oh, it's okay," he said, pulling me into a hug. I didn't flinch. I stood perfectly still. The smell of sawdust was gone, replaced by the faint, lingering scent of her floral perfume. The scent of my battlefield. "I told you it was all for us," he whispered into my hair. That night, I didn't go to the war room at the dining table. I went online and I booked a consultation with the best family and business litigation lawyer I could find. Her name was Anya Sharma. Her website described her as uncompromising in the pursuit of justice for her clients. Perfect. For the next 2 days, while Liam went off to his new life, I became the architect of his reckoning. I didn't just gather my evidence. I curated it. I built a case so strong, so irrefutable, that no lie could dismantle it. I created a master document, a testament to my contribution and his deceit. Exhibit A, the investment. I created a detailed timeline. It started with the date of my grandmother's inheritance transfer, complete with the wire confirmation number. Then, I logged every single freelance payment I had ever deposited into our accounts, cross-referencing them with the business's early expenses. I created pie charts. I made spreadsheets. It showed that in the first 2 years of Hearthstone Homes, over 60% of the initial capital and operating costs had come directly from me. I wasn't his girlfriend. I was his primary financial backer. Exhibit B, the labor. I compiled a professional portfolio, just as I would for a paying client. It included the logo design process, the website analytics showing the traffic I had generated, the print-ready files for every brochure and ad. Then, I went through 5 years of our shared calendar and my own work logs. I estimated the hours I had spent on his bookkeeping, on client calls, on managing his chaotic schedule. I assigned a conservative hourly rate to that labor, the same rate I charged my other clients. The total was staggering. It was a 6-figure sum. Unpaid wages. Sweat equity in its purest form. Exhibit C, the deceit. This was the most painful and the most powerful exhibit. It started with the printed GPS logs of his trips to Cypress Heights. Then, the credit card statements, with every suspicious purchase: the jewelry, the flowers, the luxury linens, the meals at restaurants he told me he was too busy To go to with me highlighted in damning yellow. I found the website for the jewelry store and screenshotted the pearl earrings that matched the one I'd found. And finally, the crown jewel of my case. I drove back to Cypress Heights at dawn when the light was perfect, and I took a photograph of the house. Then I scanned the original napkin sketch he had drawn for me all those years ago. I placed the two images side by side on a single page. The dream and the betrayal, identical. When it was all done, I saved the entire dossier to a new encrypted flash drive. I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. He had called me crazy. He had called me paranoid. But this dossier wasn't emotion. It wasn't a story I had made up. It was facts. It was evidence. It was the truth, cold and hard and meticulously organized. He had built his world with wood and nails. I had built my case with data and proof. And my case was designed to tear his world down to the studs. Anya Sharma's office was on the 20th floor of a downtown skyscraper. The windows overlooked the entire city, a sprawling map of lives and businesses. It felt fitting. I was here to redraw my own map. The office was modern and minimalist, decorated in cool shades of gray and white. There was nothing soft or sentimental about it. It was a place for facts, not feelings. Miss Sharma was exactly as her website promised. She was sharp, impeccably dressed in a dark gray suit, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. She had intelligent, perceptive eyes that seemed to see right through the calm facade I was trying to project. She shook my hand firmly. "Miss Vance, thank you for coming in. Please, have a seat." She didn't start with, "Tell me what happened." She started with, "You said on the phone you had documents. Let's start there." Her directness was a relief. It anchored me. I took the encrypted flash drive from my bag and slid it across the polished surface of her large desk. "It's all on there," I said, organized into 3 exhibits. She plugged it into her computer, and for the next 20 minutes she was silent. The only sounds were the quiet clicks of her mouse and the distant hum of city traffic below. She scrolled through the spreadsheets. She examined the portfolio. She zoomed in on the receipts. I watched her face, looking for any sign of judgment or disbelief. There was none. There was only intense, focused concentration. When she finally got to the last page of Exhibit C, the side-by-side comparison of the napkin sketch and the photograph of the house, she paused. She looked at the 2 images for a long time. Then, she leaned back in her chair, took off her glasses, and looked at me. For the first time, her expression softened from professional neutrality to something approaching empathy. "Miss Vance, Lara," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "First, let me say I am so sorry you are going through this. This is a brutal and calculated betrayal." The validation was so powerful it almost broke me. To have this sharp, intelligent woman look at my evidence and see not a crazy, paranoid girlfriend, but a victim of a profound deception. It was like a dam breaking inside me. I held back the tears, but only just. "But second, and more importantly from a legal standpoint," she continued, her tone shifting back to business, "this is one of the most well-documented cases of its kind I have ever seen. You haven't just been a supportive partner. You have, by any reasonable legal definition, been an active, uncompensated partner in his business, Heartstone Homes." She started to break it down for me. "Your financial contributions," she said, pointing to the screen, "are not gifts. They are capital investments. Your labor, the design work, the administration, the bookkeeping is not a girlfriend's help. It is unpaid professional services. In this state, courts can recognize a partnership in fact, even without a formal agreement, if the conduct of the parties demonstrates a business relationship. Your evidence demonstrates exactly that." She then turned to the house. "And this," she said, tapping the photograph, "this is the smoking gun. The fact that he used a shared, preconceived design, one you collaborated on for your own future, to build a home for another person using the resources of the business you helped build. That is an egregious breach of trust and fiduciary duty. We can argue that the house itself is an asset of the partnership, built with partnership funds and labor for the personal enrichment of one partner. He didn't just cheat on you, Miss Vance. He defrauded you. Defrauded. The word hung in the air. It was the perfect word. It encompassed the entirety of his crime against me. He hadn't just broken my heart. He had committed fraud. So what happens now? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Now, we decide our strategy, Anya said, leaning forward. We have two paths. We can pursue a settlement, where we present this evidence to him and his lawyer privately and negotiate for a significant portion of the business assets and a cash payout. Or, we can file a lawsuit and take him to court. The latter is more public, more expensive, and more emotionally draining. But your case is exceptionally strong. She looked at me, her gaze steady. He thinks you're his dependent girlfriend. He thinks the business, the truck, the house, it's all his. We are going to disabuse him of that notion. We are going to show him that you were the foundation he built everything on. And we are going to make him pay for it. I walked out of that office an hour later feeling taller. The icy resolve was still there, but now it was backed by the full force of the law. I wasn't just a woman scorned. I was a plaintiff with a rock-solid case. He had tried to take my world. Anya Sharma was going to help me take his. The plan Anya laid out was simple, but it required a level of duplicity that made my stomach churn. I had to continue the charade. I had to go home every night and play the part of the apologetic, slightly insecure, but ultimately loving girlfriend who had seen the error of her ways. Every smile I faked, every casual question I asked about his day, was a strategic move on a chessboard he didn't even know he was playing on. It was the most exhausting performance of my life. The first step, Anya had instructed, is to secure your own position. We need to move before he does. My first action was to open a new bank account at a completely different bank, an account he knew nothing about. My freelance work was my own again. The next check that came in went directly into my new private account. It felt like the first breath of clean air after years of breathing smoke. It was a small act of liberation, but it was mine. Next, I had to secure the evidence. While he was on site at their house, I spent an afternoon making meticulous paper copies of the most critical financial documents from my digital files. The bank statements showing my inheritance transfer, the invoices from my freelance work, the early business receipts paid for by my funds. I took the new, encrypted flash drive and the folder of paper documents and rented a small safe deposit box at my new bank. The originals were now off-site, secure, beyond his reach. If he got suspicious and decided to wipe our home computer, he would be wiping copies, not the case itself. The hardest part was separating our lives while still living together. I started quietly moving my most important personal belongings, irreplaceable photos, documents, my grandmother's jewelry into a small storage unit I rented under my name. Every day, I'd leave with a large purse or a tote bag, carrying another small piece of my life away from him. Our apartment was slowly becoming just his apartment. He didn't notice a thing. He was too absorbed in his new life, too confident in my submission. During this time, I felt a strange sense of detachment, like I was a spy in my own life. I would watch him talk on the phone, his voice low and intimate, and I would feel nothing but a cold curiosity. I listened to his lies about the project, about the stress, about how he couldn't wait until it was all over so we could focus on us. And I would nod and smile and add his lies to a mental ledger. Each one was another piece of kindling for the fire that was coming. Anya had told me we needed one more thing, something to counter the inevitable "she's a liar" or "she's exaggerating" defense. He will claim your contributions were just a girlfriend helping out, she'd said. We need him, in his own words, to acknowledge your importance to the business's creation. This led to the most dangerous part of my plan. I bought a tiny, high-quality voice recorder. I knew I had one shot. I chose a Friday night, a time when we were usually relaxed. I opened a bottle of wine, the kind we used to share back when we were happy. I steered the conversation back to the beginning. "You know," I said, my voice laced with fake nostalgia. "I was looking at some old files today, and I found the first logo I ever designed for Hearthstone Homes." He smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile, the kind I hadn't seen in a long time. "The one with the crooked hearth? Man, I loved that logo. We were so broke back then. We really were, I said, laughing along with him. The sound felt alien in my throat. I honestly don't know how we would have made it through that first year if my grandma hadn't passed when she did. That money, it was a lifesaver. I held my breath. The tiny recorder in my pocket was on. Are you kidding? He said, shaking his head. It wasn't a lifesaver, EL. It was the life raft. We would have sunk in 3 months without it. My credit was shot. I had no capital. That money, plus all the work you were putting in. You were the entire foundation of the company. For the first 2 years, bingo, it was a clean, unsolicited admission, a direct contradiction to the narrative he would almost certainly try to spin later. I had him. We were a good team, I said, and for a fleeting second, the lie was pierced by a pang of genuine sorrow for what we'd lost. Or, more accurately, what I'd lost, and what he'd thrown away. The best, he agreed, clinking his wineglass against mine. He had no idea he was toasting to his own downfall. Later that night, I uploaded the audio file to the secure cloud drive and labeled it Exhibit D. The trap was set. All the pieces were in place. Now all I had to do was choose the moment to spring it. The moment I chose was a Saturday, a beautiful, sunny Saturday afternoon, the kind of day we once would have spent hiking or browse flea markets, dreaming about the future. Now, it was the day I had chosen to detonate the bomb I had so carefully constructed. It was the day his two worlds were scheduled for a head-on collision. Anya had hired the best process server in the city, a man who specialized in difficult serves. I had provided him with the address in Cypress Heights and a detailed description of Liam and his truck. The plan was for the server to arrive at precisely 2:00 p.m. According to Liam's predictable weekend routine, he would be there, likely hosting a barbecue or enjoying the patio with Valerie. He would be at his most relaxed, his most triumphant. I, on the other hand, was a mess of nervous energy. I wasn't at the apartment. I couldn't be. I was sitting in a small, anonymous coffee shop halfway across town, staring at my phone, my coffee untouched. My entire future was balanced on a knife's edge. At 1:59 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from Anya. Server is in position. Good luck. I felt a tremor run through my hands. I pictured the scene, the perfect house, the manicured lawn, the happy couple, and then the arrival of a stranger, holding a thick manila envelope that contained the truth. Liam would later describe the moment to his lawyer, who would then describe it in a legal letter to Anya. I pieced it together from those dry, sterile documents, but in my mind, I saw it all in vivid color. He and Valerie were on the back patio, our patio design, the one with the built-in fire pit. They were entertaining another couple. There was wine, music, the smell of something expensive grilling on the barbecue. He was at the peak of his new life, playing the role of the successful home builder and provider. He was king of the castle he had stolen. The process server, a tall, impassive man in a polo shirt, didn't come to the back. He walked right up to the front door and rang the bell. Valerie answered, smiling, expecting another guest. Good afternoon, the server said politely. I'm looking for Mr. Liam Thorne. He's in the back, Valerie said, her hospitality unwavering. Can I tell him who's asking? I have a legal document for him, the man stated, his voice devoid of emotion. Valerie's smile faltered. She led the man through the house, our house, to the patio. All conversation stopped. The four of them looked up as the stranger approached. Liam Thorne? The server asked. Liam stood up, wiping his hands on a napkin, a look of mild annoyance on his face. That's me. Can I help you? You've been served, the server said, holding out the thick envelope. Liam stared at him, then at the envelope, as if it were a venomous snake. He didn't take it. What is this? Some kind of joke? It's no joke, sir, the server said, his voice carrying across the silent patio. He dropped the envelope at Liam's feet, as was legally permissible when a recipient refuses to take it. Have a good day. And then he turned and walked away. The silence he left behind was deafening. Liam, frozen in place, stared at the envelope on the ground. Valerie and their guests stared at him. The perfect afternoon was shattered. Slowly, as if in a trance, Liam bent down and picked it up. He tore it open. The first page he saw was the summons. A lawsuit. The plaintiff, a Laura Vance. His face went pale. Then he saw the name of the law firm representing me, Sharma and Associates. He knew the name. Everyone in the city knew the name. They were legal sharks. He frantically flipped through the pages. He saw the claims: breach of partnership duty, fraud, unjust enrichment. He saw the demand for a full forensic accounting of Hearthstone Homes. He saw the detailed list of my financial contributions, my unpaid labor, the catalog of his deceit. He saw the side-by-side comparison of the napkin sketch and the house he was standing in. Valerie, her voice tight with suspicion, finally spoke. "Liam, what is that? Who is a Laura Vance?" He couldn't answer, because how could he? How could he explain that the woman he had always described as his assistant or his ex was, in fact, the co-founder and primary investor of the business that had paid for this house? How could he explain that the very design of the home they were living in was a dream he had stolen from her? The foundation of his world wasn't just unstable, it had just been vaporized. At 2:15 p.m., my phone buzzed again. It was Anya. Service confirmed. He has it. Then another text, a moment later. Check your email. I opened my email. There was a message from her. Attached was a single photo, taken by the process server from the street. It was a picture of the envelope, lying on the stone patio at Liam's feet. Proof. The bomb had been delivered. I took my first sip of my now cold coffee. I didn't know what would happen next. Not exactly. But I knew one thing. For certain, the game had changed. He had always been the builder, the one in control. But now, I had the blueprints to his destruction. And the demolition had just begun. The aftermath was not a single, fiery explosion, but a slow, agonizing collapse. Liam, faced with a mountain of undeniable evidence and the legal prowess of Anya Sharma, had no choice. To fight the lawsuit in court would have meant public humiliation and financial ruin. His carefully constructed image as a self-made man would be exposed as a fraud, built on the back of a woman he had systematically deceived. He folded. The settlement negotiations were brutal and swift. Anya was relentless. "We didn't ask for a piece of the business. We demanded what I was owed. We presented the full accounting, my initial $50,000 investment, the conservative valuation of my 5 years of unpaid labor, a percentage of the business's appreciated value, and punitive damages for the fraud." The final number was shocking. It was a number that Liam could not pay out of pocket. To meet the settlement, he was forced to sell. The beautiful house in Cypress Heights, our house, went on the market. The irony was so thick I could taste it. The ultimate symbol of his betrayal was now being liquidated to pay for that same betrayal. His relationship with Valerie predictably imploded. Their world, built on my stolen dreams and his web of lies, couldn't withstand the harsh glare of the truth. The last I heard, she had moved out before the "for sale" sign even went up on the lawn. Hearthstone Homes was also gutted. He had to sell most of the major assets, the new truck, the expensive equipment to cover the costs. The company he had built into a premier home builder was reduced to a shell of its former self, his reputation in the industry irrevocably tarnished. He got to keep the name, but he had lost everything else. The day the settlement wire transfer hit my new bank account, I felt a strange sense of quiet. There was no triumphant joy, no desire for revenge anymore. There was just peace. It was the quiet that comes after a long and violent storm. I looked at the number on the screen, a number that represented years of my life, my work, my pain. It wasn't his money. It was my money. I had finally reclaimed it. For months, I did nothing. I traveled. I went to places I had always wanted to see, places Liam had always dismissed as someday. I sat in cafes in Paris. I hiked trails in Patagonia. I read books on quiet beaches in Greece. I was rediscovering who I was without him, without our shared dream, without the weight of his promises. I was learning to be just a Laura again, and I found that I liked her very much. When I finally came home, I knew what I had to do. I didn't want the life he had stolen anymore. I didn't want that house or the memories attached to it. I wanted to build something new, something that was entirely my own. I bought a small plot of land on the other side of the state, overlooking the ocean. There was no majestic oak tree, no history of broken promises. It was a blank slate. I started my own company, Vance Design and Build. I didn't just do the design work. I took courses in project management. I learned the business from the ground up, the right way. My first client was me. The house I designed was nothing like the one on the napkin. It was smaller, smarter, more honest. It had huge windows, yes, but they faced the sunset, not the sunrise. It had a simple, clean design, with no wraparound porch built for show, but a private, sheltered deck built for quiet contemplation. It had no smiling chimney. It was a house built for one, with enough room for a future I couldn't yet imagine, but one that I would design on my own terms. Today, I am standing on that deck, a mug of coffee in my hands. The ocean breeze is cool and salty. The frame of my house is up, the scent of fresh-cut lumber and sawdust hanging in the air. It is the same scent that once defined him, the scent of promises. But it doesn't haunt me anymore, because today, it is the scent of a promise I am making to myself. He promised me the world, and for a long time, that was all I wanted. Now I know the truth. The world isn't something someone can give you. It's something you have to build for yourself. And for the first time, I have the perfect blueprint.